Welcome to Flat Ride of the Week, episode 16. Today we'll be talking about the extremely popular Wave Swinger. If you want to learn more about the more modern, taller variations of this ride, like the Starflyer or Windseeker, check out Flat Ride of the Week, episode 4, linked in the description. As always, if we forget something or say something that's incorrect, please politely correct us in the comment section below. Let's get started. Let's get started with the history. So the history of the Wave Swinger type ride dates back to 1904 in the United States. At that time, many amusement parks were based around having some kind of beach or freshwater access for swimming, so Traver Engineering came up with the Sea Swing. This was an entirely wooden ride with a diesel or in later models an electric engine. The swing was placed at an angle, so at points the riders would be flung into the water below them. And because the rides were made entirely out of wood, they had to be replaced every few years due to rot. One of the most famous installations of these were at Cedar Point. They had many of these, including multiple at one time, with the last one leaving the park in somewhere in the 1950s. Sometime around 1908, some variation of this ride was being produced that went over land and not over water.
And some smaller European companies created some kind of wave swing ride after World War II. But the most popular of these designs would come in 1972.
In 1972, West German company Zierer partnered with Franz Schwarzkopf, brother of Anton Schwarzkopf, to create the first modern wave swinger type ride. This ride featured the now well-known elevation changes throughout the ride cycle. This was achieved using an angled pole at the top of the elevation tower that causes the crown, otherwise known as the top of the ride, to spin off-axis in a clockwise direction. Meanwhile, the tower itself it's mounted on, that spins in a counterclockwise direction. The first models were only permanent, but in 1974, a transportable model was introduced. Zierer has since sold over 200 wave swingers to parks across the world, and most of their sales of the ride today are made in Asia.
The original model name in German is Wellenflug, which translates to wave flight.
And Zierer's currently being produced models of the Wave Swinger are the Wave Swinger 40, which is the smallest of the current model of Wave Swingers. This has 24 single and 8 double seats with a capacity of 40 riders total. The ride extends upwards 11.9 meters or 39 feet, and the double seats allow for smaller children to ride when accompanied by an adult. Now, these double seats are something that's only on these new models. This is kind of a new introduction to the product line. Then there is the Wave Swinger 56, which has 40 single and 8 double seats for a total capacity of 56 people. The ride extends 12.6 meters into the air or 41 feet. Both models are not made in transportable versions anymore. They are now only permanent. Both of these can actually be easily reprogrammed to run backwards. As recently as the early 2000s, Zierer was still building the 24, 32, and 40 and 48 and 64 rider versions of the Wave Swinger. However, it seems that they no longer produce these. Probably the most well-known version of the Wave Swinger is the 48 guest version, with all guests sitting in a single person seat. This is what a lot of US parks have, not all. In particular, Cedar Point's have it, and this is where we're going to get into operator stories because, yeah, that's right, I operated Cedar Point's Wave Swinger for a couple days. So Cedar Point got theirs, it's a Zierer, in 1979. And this one was kind of an interesting one. So the reason I ended up working this was because during Haunt, I was at Mine Ride on Fridays because there's less rides open. And they wanted to have Wave Swinger open, so they paired Mine Ride with Wave Swinger. So I ended up getting trained there. And it was kind of fun because, as you know from Flat Ride of the Week, episode 5, Other Brennan was actually there too. And so we were both two Brennan, spelled exactly the same way, operating this ride. And this ride, kind of a pain in the neck to work. For one, you have to count the people going in. I can't imagine working this ride with one operator. But two, it was tolerable. So you count the people going in. So you're constantly, people are going in. You're spieling to them, telling them what to do. And you're counting up to 48. So it's kind of a lot to do, especially when you got to screen heights and stuff too. So that was a lot. So you'd always end up with either, not enough seats or too many seats empty, and it was just kind of annoying. Then loading was always annoying because people didn't realize you had to put your stuff in the bin, but that's kind of a thing for a lot of rides. And then restraint checks were interesting because Cedar Point's, for one, all of the seatbelts are definitely not original. If you think of like a coaster on like those Intamin Click Fix seatbelts, are also on their drop towers. Those click fixed seatbelt type things. This had those, except they were like smaller and made by some Chinese company because they were covered in Chinese letters. It was really interesting. So they were kind of not the easiest to get on exactly, and a lot of times the bars that actually restrains guests would not come down all the way, so it'd be like stuck up above the chain a little bit, and people wouldn't realize it, so it's kind of annoying. But also the way it works is you have two people starting like together and then work around the ride. So you start back to back and work your way around the ride. Now that's all fine and dandy and everything as long as you're checking the same way, but I won't get too far into that. And yeah, it was kind of annoying. There was one story, I'll tell this one. I was working it with one of our internationals, and another big problem on this ride was phones, because people think they can have phones out because it's just a swing. Another big problem is people grabbing onto other people's swings, but that's a whole another thing. And so someone had their phone out. The international was in controls, spieled, put your phone away or I'll stop the ride because they didn't put their phone away. We went over, well, he said, okay, go get the phone. I didn't realize who it was, so I spent a bunch of time searching for this person who had their phone out. And don't find them. I come back and finally get him to come out of controls and tell me who it was, and the person's like, huh? Oh, I didn't realize. So it's about 2 minutes of the ride just being on the ground halfway through its cycle, and at this point it's too late to just tell everyone to get off. So we're just like, okay, I guess we gotta go check restraints again. We didn't even kick the guy off because he was like, oh, I'll put it away. So we check restraints again after all this time. Of course, we get confused checking restraints because we didn't start in the same place. It was just a big mess. I finally get back to enable, and my area supervisor was standing there watching the whole thing. And he was just like, so what happened? Because slow operations at Cedar Point's not a good thing. And I explained it to him and he laughed, but that was that. Another big problem was people trying to grab out to other swings. Other Brennan's famous spiel was, I'm not blind. And people were being idiots on this thing. Yeah, that's Cedar Point's Zero Wave Swinger. There's a lot of them, but that's the story from ours.
Zero also made a lot of transportable wave swingers. It's the same as the 48-seat model, but the control booth actually sits in the middle of the ride. Anyone had one once. And also different from the other ones is that they have a complete floor structure to transport, of course. In Germany, there's about 5 ones still traveling, and in France, there's only 1 left traveling.
And then, moving on to the competition, we have the Chance Rides Yo-Yo, which was introduced in the 1990s. I like to think of this as kind of the crude American version of a wave swinger. This ride seats 32 riders and comes in both transportable and permanent versions. When the ride is at its max height, the entire crown is tilted to 30 degrees, but that's not a rotating tilt, it is just to one side. This causes the ride to dip downwards in one single area, which is not nearly as unpredictable or fun as the Zero models. This ride can be transported on just one single trailer, though, which has made it very popular at most American showmen own one of these because it's so easy to transport. Then we have the Zamperla Flying Carousel, which, looking at it, there's almost no visible difference to this and the Zero model. Zamperla, however, still makes a 48-seat version and a 64-seat version. The ride goes to a max height of 13.3 meters or 43 feet.
Other companies like Vekoma, Preston and Barbieri, Micho, and a lot of other smaller companies also made some kind of variation of the wave swinger design. And in 1971, Schwarzkopf made 2 rides named the Apollo 14. They were both transportable.
So the original version of this ride was quite different than what they became. So originally, it's a kind of hard to describe. I'll see if I can find a free-to-use picture here. But basically, think of a Zamperla Kitty Ferris wheel, and then put that on some kind of arm that it can traverse upwards on, and then put that whole thing around some kind of giant fake moon and make the whole thing spin. And that is basically what it was. It was really hard to describe, but obviously it didn't stay in that state forever.
Yeah, well, both of them ended up at Saharen, where they both stood next to each other for a long time. And somewhere in the 80s, one of them got fit with new wave swinger style seats. Around 1990, the one that still had the original Ferris wheel things moved to Dreamland in the UK and got refitted with the wave swinger seats. And this one from Dreamland ended up at Loudon Castle in the UK, and it's currently unknown what happened to it, but it was standing but not operating for a long time. The other Apollo is still operating to this day at Slagharen.
Alright. I think that is all we have. Do you have anything else that you wanted to tag in?
Well, these wave swinger type of rides are like really common here in Europe. Like every mid-sized park has one.
Yeah, likewise for the United States.
There's nothing more common than a wave swinger.
Absolutely. So,
And they
perhaps if you're not too much of a flat ride person yet, this could be a good ride to start you off. Would you say so?
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
They're fun
Not really
rides.
nauseating.
They're simple, they're common, so I bet your home park probably has one. So if you see one and you've not ridden it before, maybe give it a shot. I think that's all we have for this week. Well, last chance. Anything else?
No.
All right. We'll see you next week.